Hey guys, it's Kelsey here with Kelsey Freeman Photography. We are going to edit this picture right here using Lightroom and Photoshop, and we will be using hand editing presets and actions as well. So the first thing I like to do is start off with a preset. So I'm going to hover over the preset I want to use. I'm going to run August from the Evoke collection, and you can see it does most of the work for me. I do want to do a few little tweaks here and there, and then we'll be all set. So the first thing I want to do is adjust my white balance. So I'm going to bring this down and just make it a little bit cooler. It was just kind of warm for my taste. And I like the tint. I think it's not too green, it's not too magenta. It looks pretty good. But I am going to bring up the exposure just a little bit. And let's see here, what else do I want to do? Let me bring up the shadows a tad. And then I'm also going to bring up the vibrance or the saturation a little bit. So I'm just going to bring this up until I'm happy, so maybe about there. And then the last thing I want to do is I'm going to go down to the bottom where there's the grain. I don't want any grain on this image. And then the noise reduction, I'm going to bring that up as well, just so it's a nice kind of soft looking picture. So maybe about here or so. And I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and export and open it up into Photoshop. Okie dokie, so now that we have our picture right here in Photoshop, I'm going to zoom in here, and there's just a few little things I want to take care of on her face. So I am going to come over here and grab my spot healing brush, and I'm just going to kind of hit a few little spots here on her sweet little face that have some bumps that would just be easier to remove using this tool. So literally just click over where you want, and it's going to take sample areas from nearby and kind of try to fill in the blanks. So let's see here. That looks pretty good. I don't want to do too much. So I'm going to, oh, there's one little scratch right here on her little leg. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and get some actions, and I'm going to use the Wander collection. Let's see here. Let me scroll on up. So I'm going to start off with smooth skin, and I'm going to press play, and it tells you what to do. So just make sure you follow the dialog box. I'm going to grab a paintbrush, make sure I don't have any hardness to my brush, and my opacity I'm going to set to about, I'm probably going to do about 60 or so on her skin. I like to kind of use a good bit on baby skin. And let me make my brush smaller. So I'm just going to kind of brush, oopsies, I already went out the lines. So I'm just going to kind of brush around her face. Make sure not to do what I just did and go outside the lines. You also don't want to hover over important creases or things such as the mouth or the outside of the eyes, anything like that, because it will start to look like super not like who they are if you start to go over lines and such. So just gonna go around her face like so. Don't forget neck, chin, all that. You want everything to look the same. So you want it all to look really nice and smooth if you're going to smooth something out. Something that always catches my eye when I see people Photoshop is if they happen to just smooth their face and then the rest of their body is not, you can really tell. So you want to try to make sure if you do any alterations to somebody's skin, no matter how you edit, if you do, use my actions or if you use frequency separation or whatever, you want to make sure you try to make sure all their skin looks pretty uniform, and you're not just paying attention like to their face, because it'll totally give it away that you did any editing if it doesn't all look kind of the same. So I'm going to zoom on out here. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to flatten that. And then I think I want to do a few things to her eyes. So I'm going to do blue pop and press play. And I'm going to make my brush maybe 30%, just to kind of add a little bit of a blue pop to her eyes. And then let's do eye detail. And I'm going to do 100% opacity on my brush. And just so you know, if you're not familiar with keyboard shortcuts, they're like my favorite and they save me so much time. So if you're wondering how I'm changing the opacity of my brush, I'm just pressing numbers on my keyboard. So to get like 50% opacity of my brush, I would press 5 on my keyboard. To get 100, you press 0, and it just keeps everything going really quickly. I normally edit with like my left hand on my keyboard and my right hand on my mouse. And then I'm going to do less green skin. Press play, and I'm going to do maybe 30% opacity, and I actually want to go over everything on her, even her clothes, not just her skin, just to kind of help take away some of these greens. So just kind of go around. That looks good. Alrighty, so let me go ahead and flatten. And the first thing I want to do is get my sky. The sky is just kind of blah, so I'm going to start off using my clone stamp tool just to kind of get rid of these little leaves in the back. You can't really tell, you know, it just kind of looks like they're floating. So I'm just going to use my clone stamp tool and get rid of this stuff before I put my sky in. Everything else looks good. So I've got my sky here. I'm going to copy this and paste it here. And then, so in the picture, the sun, I believe, was coming from like right about here. So I always try to make sure that I take my sun. So I'm just going to put my mouse, or let me bring the opacity down a little bit. I'm going to, let me find where I want to click. So I'm going to click here. I'm just going to click like 7 on my keyboard to lower the opacity, so now I know I can see where I'm going with all this. The sun is here. I'm going to put it right where the sun is in the image, and now we can bring back the opacity. One thing you want to make sure you do if you're ever using a sky overlay is you try to make sure it matches your background. If you have a blurry background, like I do, I had a shallow depth of field, so it kind of blurred my flowers in the back. You don't want to have a crisp in focus sky. It makes it look super fake. So try to make sure you always blur it to where it kind of matches the background. So I'm going to go to filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. And I already edited this picture earlier, so I know that this is the amount of blur that I want. So I'm going to press OK, but just move your scroll here, or your slider, just to find what works for your picture. And I'm going to press okie dokie. And then all I'm going to do is change my blending mode to, hold on, what did I use? Darken. And then I want to fix a few things here. Like right here, it kind of looks fake. It did a really good job of kind of making it look like it fits, but there's a few things that I want to adjust. So I'm going to add a layer mask. So if you click this little button here, it's a square with a circle in the middle. That's your layer mask. And I'm just going to grab a paintbrush, and I'm going to make sure it's black because the layer mask is white. I'm going to use black to hide part of this. I'm going to make my brush kind of big, and then I'm going to really lower my opacity and the flow of my brush. That way I'm not like making a hard line, and you can't just really tell that I'm getting rid of some of the darkness in the sky. And I'm just going to slowly start to brush back here. Okay, let's bring the opacity up a little. I'm going to brush over here just a little bit, just to kind of brighten up the bottom portion of the sky so it doesn't look too gloomy, because there was a big cloud there in that image, but I do love the softness of this sky and the sun and the colors. So that looks really good. Now there's a few things I want to do to make this sky kind of fit, so I want to change the coloring of it just a little bit. So I'm going to grab my vibrance here, and I want to clip this to just the sky layer. That way they're just kind of all connected. So I'm going to, I held Alt, and then when you hover over, it brings up the square with the little down arrow. Just click right there, and as long as you're over this line while you're clicking Alt, it'll pop up. Click it, and it'll connect those two together. So now my vibrance is only going to be affecting my sky. If I were to put any layers under my sky, it's not going to affect those layers as well. I want to bring my vibrance up a good bit just to really bring the color out and the saturation, honestly. So I'm just going to bring this up, and I'm going to come to the saturation as well and kind of bring it up. So maybe around here. So now I can really kind of see the sky. It was kind of blending in too much earlier. And what else do I want to do to it? I think that I want to change the color balance just a little bit. So I'm going to click my color balance tool here. And I'm under midtones. It's going to obviously affect the midtones of the sky picture. And I'm going to make it a little bit more red, just to really warm it up and kind of help make it match the colors of the picture. Magenta and greens, I don't want to do anything to that, but I do want to make it a little bit more yellow. And then I'm also going to click on my highlights and tweak those just a little bit as well. So I'm going to make my highlights more red, so about there, and then I'm going to make these a little bit more magenta, and then I'm going to make it a little bit more yellow as well. So maybe about here, there, that looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm also going to clip this to the sky and the vibrance as well. So you see it's affecting the entire image. I don't want this color balance to affect the entire image, just the sky. So when you clip it together to just the sky, that's the only thing it's going to be affecting. So now we have a really nice, vibrant, pinky kind of sunset sky, and I'm loving how it looks. And let's see here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to bring my sky opacity down to maybe 70. So I pressed 7 on my keyboard. And then let's go ahead and do some actions and really get this thing going and get the colors that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go down and start off with the tone add-ons of the Arden collection. This is like my favorite action set. I just love it. And it's all about browns, tons of different kinds of color combinations of browns. So I'm going to start off with Raven. I'll press play, and then I want to have maybe 20% opacity or so. Like I said, I've already edited this picture, so I know kind of what I'm going for. But when I first start editing a picture, I just change my opacity around until I'm happy with how it looks. That's really all I do. I just press play, see if I like the overall tone on the image, and then I'll change the opacity to something that fits. And then I'm also going to run Robin. It gives you more of like a cool depth of brown, but I don't want much opacity on this, so let's bring this down a good bit. And then I want to do one more thing. I'm going to go up to the Wander collection, and I'm going to go to the tone add-ons and play Pembroke. And I'm going to change this opacity to 30%. So we already have, just with those 3 tones, a really nice, kind of moody brown sort of edit. And it's just totally my style, and I love it so much. So now that we've got those, let's go ahead, and I want to do a little bit more less green skin over her because she's still just a little too green. So less green skin, and press play. And I'm probably going to do, let me bring my flow back up. Probably going to do maybe 30% opaque, maybe 20% actually, and just go over her whole body like so, just so she really stands out and she doesn't look too green next to all of the greenery. And I want to brighten this up a little bit, so I'm going to click on levels and just kind of play around with it until I, find a happy medium. So somewhere around there. In the middle, when you scroll to the left, it's going to make your whole image kind of tackle the midtones. It's going to make it brighter. If you move it to the right, it'll darken everything. The shadows are over here on the left, and when you scroll it, it'll kind of make those shadows a little darker. And then if you scroll the right side, it makes your highlights brighter. So I kind of like to play up here. I don't mess around too much on the bottom side because then it really adds a matte to my image, and I'm more so of a contrasty type of person. So I'm just going to bring this down a little bit, and then my highlights I'm also going to bring up a good bit. So maybe about there. So you see it just added a nice little brightness and a bit of contrast. And then I'm going to bring up a little bit of vibrance. I often find myself adding vibrance all the time in pictures. I just love color. Love it so much. So I really try to add a bit of vibrance as much as I can without going too overboard. Let's go ahead and add in a sun. I'm going to go down to the Arden collection, and I'm going to run Little Vivid Sun. I don't want a huge sun. I want something small. And Vivid Sun is going to be nice and like warm and orange. And then so you can just, as long as you have your selection tool here clicked, you can move your sun around wherever. But I do want to make it a little bit smaller probably. So I'm going to press Control T. And while I drag the corner to make it smaller, I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard, and that's going to make sure it keeps the whole ratio the same. It's going to keep my sun a perfect circle, and that way I'm not dragging it in a way that makes it into an oval or anything. So holding Shift while I do that's pretty important. So I've got my sun in here. Let's see, what else do I want to do? I feel like I want to brighten up her face just a little bit more. So I'm going to go back to my skin actions from the Wander collection. I'm going to click on Overall Brighten and press play. Grab my paintbrush, and I'm probably going to do maybe 40% and just brush it totally on top of Little Miss Priss here. Like so. Let me go back over this legs a little bit. There we go. Much better. Nice and bright. What else do I want to do? I think I want to add, don't judge me, a little bit more vibrance. I could have gone back to my other vibrance that I had already and just double clicked here and added more, but oh well. It doesn't hurt to have more layers. Let me add I want to tweak the lighting just a little more. So I'm going to go back to levels and bring it up a little bit more, and add a little bit more contrast. I'm telling you, like, I do the same things over and over again. Like, I'll do like 5 different layers of levels and curves and all sorts of stuff. All right, and let's bring these highlights into a little bit. And then what I want to do to add a little bit of soft depth is I'm going to go down to the Arden collection. Down at the bottom where you've got your extras, I'm going to click on add some depth, and I'm going to press play and make that 30% opacity. And voila, we have a nice little edit here. So let me grab the original before, and then we'll see the after. Okie doke, so here is the before we even opened it up into Lightroom, and then here is the after. So before and after, so we added some really awesome colors. We got a little bit of sky going on, and a nice little sun enhanced, and yeah, I love this. I think she's absolutely adorable, and I love the sunflowers. It's perfect. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this little edit, and thanks so much for watching. All right, bye.